Why does bread rise in the oven even though the yeast does not stay active for the whole bake? The answer is that yeast starts the process, but heat finishes it. Before the dough goes into the oven, yeast has already been feeding on sugars and producing carbon dioxide. That gas becomes trapped in tiny bubbles inside the stretchy gluten network. So the dough already contains thousands of little pockets of gas before baking even begins. Once the dough enters the hot oven, those bubbles start to grow quickly. At first, the rising temperature can make the yeast more active for a short time, so it produces a little more carbon dioxide. But as the dough gets hotter, the yeast can no longer keep working. The bread does not stop rising because the gas that is already trapped inside is now being heated. Warm gas expands. As those bubbles get larger, they push outward on the soft elastic dough around them. Water also matters. Dough contains a lot of moisture, and as it heats, some of that water turns into vapor. Water vapor takes up far more space than liquid water, so it adds even more pressure inside the growing bubbles. This fast increase in volume at the beginning of baking is what gives bread its final burst of growth in the oven. But the dough cannot stay stretchy forever. While the gases are expanding, heat is also changing the structure around them. The starches begin to set, and the proteins become firmer. The flexible walls around the bubbles gradually turn into the solid crumb of the finished loaf. The timing is important. If the structure becomes firm before the bubbles have expanded enough, the bread can stay dense. If the structure cannot hold the expanding gas, the bubbles can lose their shape, and the loaf may collapse. That is also why bakers sometimes slash the top of a loaf before baking. The cut creates a planned weak area where the surface can open as the bread expands, instead of tearing unpredictably. So yeast deserves credit for creating much of the gas before baking. But the dramatic rise inside the oven comes from what heat does to that trapped gas and moisture. The bubbles expand, the dough stretches, and then the starches and proteins set around them. That is why a heavy piece of dough can enter the oven and come out as a light loaf full of air pockets.